what is this thing called money? Why do we use this as money? Who makes the money? Why can't I make my own money? What's going on? Who says, why do they get to live in that house and I live in this house? Where's the law? What's the thing? What did you do? Are you a better person? God loves you more. It's like, what I was shocked by was that these guys' mindset, these guys who are the wealthiest, most powerful, in theory, most ingenious people of our time, had no confidence in their ability to avert the future. That the best they could do with all their money and all their tech is prepare for the inevitable collapse, and try to take care of themselves and their family as best as possible.
Welcome to Straight Talk, where we cut through the BS and get straight into real conversations with some of the best minds on the planet. I am your host, Af Malhotra. I am blessed to be leading these extraordinary discussions and asking tough questions that then elicit insightful answers, accelerating our awareness of the biggest issues impacting our lives and the future of humanity.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I'm Af Malhotra, the host of Straight Talk with Af. Today, once again, we have an epic guest. I have the great Doug Rushkoff with me. Now, Doug's name came up a few times with numerous individuals I have immense respect for in the field of research, in the field of technology, and his very famous and powerful podcast, Team Human, caught my attention. He's, of course, an accomplished author. He's on the show today because he wrote this pretty interesting book that's had a lot of attention. And he tells me he's been talking about this book again and again on numerous podcasts. So I'm going to do my best to make this an interesting podcast for you, or try at least. The book is called Survival of the Richest. And I'm not going to steal his thunder. He's going to tell us very briefly about why he wrote it and what was the thinking. And actually about when he launched the book, and I haven't heard him talk about this, when he launched the book, he wasn't selling it in the conventional way. He was selling it slightly differently. Which I wouldn't mind if he talks about briefly. And so, Doug, welcome on Straight Talk. Welcome to the show. Thank you for joining me. And what an honor it is to spend some time with you, 60 minutes at least. Before we start, I'd like to first focus on who is Doug. What do we know? We need to know about you, the person, your story, as you have time, so just be as expansive as you want. And then let's get to your output and your brilliant books, because I've got to understand, who is this person? How do you think the way you think? Has it changed? Is it the same? So tell us about Doug. What's this backstory like, right from when you were a child? Where were you born? Are you from the US? Which part of the world? And let's explore you for a moment, if that's okay.
Yeah, I was a middle-class kid from Queens, New York. Who I loved my first neighborhood. Our working class neighborhood was this great place I've written about a lot. It was a place where there was like one barbecue at the end of the block. It was a dead end, one barbecue pit kind of there, and all weekend long that thing would be on, and your parents could send you with a couple of Hebrew National Franks, and some other parents would cook them for you, and I mean, it wasn't utopia, but it was really normal, and everybody knew each other and trusted each other. And my dad got better jobs, and we moved to the suburbs. And the wealthier we got, the worse the barbecue got. There was no barbecue at the end of the block. Everyone had their own barbecue in their backyard. And instead of barbecuing with the Joneses, you were barbecuing against the Joneses. Do they have porterhouse? We got sirloin. They got lobsters. We got Kobe. It was like an over the hedges sort of thing. And I was confused at that point by the premise of America and wealth, and you do better and things get worse experientially. And so I got interested in theater right around then, thinking that theater would be a way to kind of expose the false nature of so much of what you do. That it seemed like a way, it's almost like theater, by creating a stage, you can then pull back and have that moment of aha. That I was really interested in that, in theater and meta theater that was self-conscious, theater that kind of woke people up to the underlying assumptions by which we live. I was really into, and I didn't know it quite at the time, but kind of denaturalizing power, denaturalizing things that we take for granted as, oh, you make money and go to the suburbs. Wait a minute. What is this thing called money? Why do we have to make it? What is the suburbs? Who invented them? What are they for? What is it like? Denaturalizing it, which is a bit like being a historian, or I was into that. What are the things? What is this thing called money? Why do we use this as money? Who makes the money? Why can't I make my own money? What's going on? Who says, why do they get to live in that house and I live in this house? Where's the law? What's the thing? What did you do? Are you a better person? God loves you more. It's like, what? All those premises. So theater seemed like this great way to do that. And I was committed to theater, and I was pre-med also throughout my life, because my nice Jewish parents said I could be whatever I want as long as it's doctor or lawyer, right? You can go to any college you want as long as it's Harvard, Princeton, or Yale. I mean, they were, second generation Americans, really first generation born in America. And they're like, there's a different, sometimes there's a different, not for all, but for some immigrants, there's a different understanding of the American dream and your obligations as a young person to make their struggle, your parents' struggle, worthwhile. So you don't just throw it away by becoming an artist or a thinker or a writer. You become a professional, right? Thing. It's just innate, maybe. And so I did that too. But I was a theater person. I was a theater person right until my late 20s. I went to college, went to grad school, was directing theater. And then there was really one moment I was involved in a production of Three Penny Opera, where the cheapest ticket was $70. Wow. And I was thinking, what the fuck, man? Here I am, this sort of Marxist trying to do Bertolt Brecht, right? Yeah. This is about, and wake people up. and theater is this expensive. And it seemed like the wealthy people going to the theater were not doing it in order to have their mindsets fundamentally changed, but they were going to reinforce their own sense of goodness. Like, oh, did you hear about the AIDS crisis? Yes, I saw Angels in America. As if paying for the ticket and sitting through the play was your activism. So now you could go back and be the same asshole you were. So right around that time that I was fed up, I went, this is crazy. I don't want to do theater because it's elitist, it's expensive, it caters to sort of business people and all that. Just then the internet was starting. And the internet, I thought, oh, here's going to be the people's medium, Vox Populus, and all that. This is, the bottom up interactive, kids in the back of the bus sharing wares. And it just seemed so open and leveling the playing field and psychedelic. And, I was a psychedelic person then too. And my most psychedelic friends that I knew from college were moving to California to become programmers at Intel, Northrop Grumman, Apple, Silicon graphics workstations. They were, working during the day, programming shit, and then coming home at night and rendering fractals on Sun workstations and going to Grateful Dead shows and scraping the peyote buds off cactuses and having DMT trips with each other. I'm like, what is this? So I became interested in this thing. That's why, and then watched and complained as this thing was slowly surrendered to the worst of capitalism and the worst of kind of tech bro scientism. And I've been writing about that and complaining about that phenomenon for the last 20, 30 years.
You remind me, that's brilliant. Thank you. You remind me of a few things. So first one, if I forget, when you talked about all of those questions, the curiosity, you remind me of my little daughter. And I'm a little bit out there, we have to be, because I'm an artist too. So I'm a musician like you are. And our brain does work a little bit differently, honestly. And I do love stage. I love the stage. I love performing. That's where I feel most comfortable, bizarrely. And when you started to talk about those basic questions, I'm also an anthropologist, by the way. So that was my first degree. When everyone else was doing business and they were looking at me, or computer science, they were like, what the hell's wrong with you, man? You're not going to make any money. You're not going to be a professor or something in some university. And then I fell into technology too. you ask those questions. One of the things I see as a big problem too, and we're not going to just complain today, but one of the problems today is curiosity. Kids teach you to be curious. They ask you all of these basic questions. My daughter, Aria, she's 4. She asks me all of the same questions, the most basic questions. And fundamentally, those are the questions as adults we somehow erase or delete or forget about or bury somewhere. And I wish we'd continue to ask those questions of ourselves. We wouldn't be in the shitty situation that we're in right now from a technological standpoint, at least the stuff that you talk about. That's one thing.
And we would have to change the way we educate kids, because we take those kids who are curious about everything and we send them to schools where we ask them to memorize things and conform, where we give them we throw an iPad in their hand in 2nd grade and then use, assessment strategies coming from Silicon Valley, which are designed to just increase education's dependence on their software and platforms, not to create curious, strange, wonderful children.
Yeah, you're bang on. And it is painful to see, and especially for people like us who are curious and are observers and are practitioners of curiosity. And, a lot of our lives, maybe we were marginalized. When you talk about diversity these days, you talk about neurocognitive people, maybe whatever category we might have been fitted into in the past. I remember, we were outliers. We weren't in the normal distribution. So you're like, no, quickly, don't ask so many questions. And then I remember there was this one time within the whole model change where people said, there's no such thing as a silly question. So, but at the early phases of when I was doing my MBA and stuff like that at reputable universities that you would know of, the mantra was very, very different. You're bang on. The second thing I want to tell you, though, just a quick one, and we'll go into this, is when you describe you as the young you, the musician, the artist, the dramatist, the director, the stage guy, and you did the tech gig and you went off because the trend, the wave, you had to pay bills, right? You went and did tech. It reminds me of India.
No, when I went into tech, it was the opposite. When I went into tech, parents would weep if their kids decided to get involved in computers because they thought they were going to go basically deciding to play Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, yeah. Okay, got you.
It was a different moment. Late 80s, early 90s was not, we're going to make money doing this. It was like, no, we're going to throw away our lives because we want to go play on the well.
Interesting. So then, okay, fair enough. The nuance then is in India today, if you look at a city like Bengaluru, as they call it these days, it's very, very interesting that the hundreds of millions of people who are MBAs and engineer graduates and so on and so forth. And, we've outsourced most of the stuff that's happening in the West to India. But what's interesting socioculturally, many of these guys are drug-taking, marijuana smoking, young guys who were forced into engineering, then realized there's no money in it. So then they did some tech computer science course, went to IIT or something similar. Now it pays them well, but actually at night, they just want to zone out. Many musicians, many rock stars, many Iron Maiden fans, Guns N' Roses fans, tabla players. And I was like, wow. So that's like your alter ego, the other side of you existing. So it kind of reminds me of that. Is that still the case in the Valley or in parts of the states that?
No, it was the case at the beginning, because you have to understand in the late 80s, early 90s, we were building a new landscape for human interaction. We were basically hallucinating something into existence. And the only people who were comfortable hallucinating things into reality were psychedelics people and children, right? So who was best at computers then? It was kids who were hackers hacking into things. And it was this weird psychedelic groups. And I wrote my first book, my first real book was called Cyberia, Cyberia. And in there I interviewed people who were, the managers at Intel and Northrop and these other companies, saying why they were hiring psychedelics users and how they were actually warning them, because they all have defense contracts, how they were warning psychedelics users a few weeks before mandatory drug tests were coming, don't trip for a week or two because we have to take your blood next week. So they understood what it was. Now you're looking for something else. Now you're looking for, and they're better and worse in some ways. You're looking for engineers, people who you could task with any challenge and know how they can code their way out of that because most of these companies, what they've done is just painted themselves into corners with code. So you hire a bright kid. How do we get out of this mess? And then you end up just with a kludge on top of a kludge on top of a kludge, where the original ethos and drive of this technology was to kind of reboot things, was to re-engineer the fundamental rules on which human beings operated.
Mm-hmm. The book that you've written, we'll come to that momentarily as well. The book that you've written, you've written so many books, Survival of the Richest. So tell us briefly, I know you've said this many times, but tell us why you wrote this. I know there was a particular event that happened. I love the way you describe that, by the way. It's very expansive, very, very stage-like, director-like. So I'm going to force you to do it again just because I like the way you describe it. And then I want to go down a pathway where, many of our listeners understand the perils of some of you call them tech bros, tech titans, whatever, the dominance and the way they're looking at the world. We get that. But we want to look at, try and be a little bit optimistic as well about what could be different, what could be better for us, and what will it take, if at all. And it could be utopian. It could be like a fantasy for us, our escape fantasy, right? But not non-billion escape fantasy. In fact, I wonder what ours is. So talk us through the book. So why did you write it?
Right.
What compels you to write it?
Well, first, you don't need to be optimistic to be constructive, right? You don't need a patina of optimism or pessimism to go, okay, in its current course, everyone dies. What could be done? What could be done to either mitigate the horrors or avert catastrophe? Or if there's going to be a catastrophe, what can we do so that some of us continue on, and what can they bring forward with them into the desert, like the Israelites escaping, Egypt? What can we bring with us so that the next civilization might not make some of the same mistakes, assuming we get a next civilization? So there's right. That could sound pessimistic, but it's not. It's just constructive. It's, well, what do we do now? I worked in hospitals, so I know that there's hospice. There's all sorts of things. Even if we're just doing hospice now, let's do hospice on humans. That's not necessarily sad. It's beautiful. How do we make this time as beautiful as it could be? So as far as this book and me, Survival of the Richest, Escape Fantasies of the Tech Billionaires, could have been written with or without the initiating event. I've been concerned about the escape fantasies of tech billionaires since AOL merged with Time Warner in 1999, when I'm like, oh no, he's executing an exit strategy. He's jumping ship, that this means AOL's ending, not that it's the beginning of the new synergy. So once I saw that most tech people were building companies not to run them, but building companies to sell them, when I realized that they really didn't care about the internet landscape, except insofar as they could execute some scorched earth strategy that would either destroy the net or the real world or people's lives or all three, I was like, oh, well, that's weird. They're trying to basically build a car that could drive fast enough for them to escape from their own exhaust. I met a lot of these guys who were, on the one hand, making apps for our kids, and on the other hand, not letting their kids use those apps and living up in, Arcata, California with a goat share and sending their kids to Rudolf Steiner schools. I'm like, what's wrong with this picture, right? These guys are trying to insulate themselves from the very damage they are creating. So I understood that when I went to do one of the high-paid talks that I do. Every once in a while, I do a talk that subsidizes everything else. And usually it's for a bunch of rich hedge fund guys who just want, kind of binary, oversimplified answers about where to place their bets. And this was one of those, only when I got to this resort, and I'm sitting in the green room waiting to be taken onto the stage, instead of bringing me out to the stage, they bring these 5 dudes into the green room who just sit around the table, in this kind of confrontational way and start peppering me with those questions with, Bitcoin or Ethereum, virtual reality or augmented reality, where do we put our money? Which is the thing? As if that's what I am, I'm the guy who would have told you to bet on Betamax, not VHS, right? I would have said bet on CompuServe, not AOL, right? I choose the better thing, not the one that's going to actually make the money. So don't talk to me. But they were doing that, and then finally they got around to Alaska or New Zealand, right? Where should they put their bunker for the event, which is the catastrophe of unknown origin, the bioengineering crisis, the nanotech accident, the climate change, environmental problem, economic unrest, that nuclear disaster, electromagnetic pulse that renders life unlivable and forces them to go out to one of these things. And I didn't know how seriously to take them, and I started sort of, needling them about their. So, you've got a bunker. Where did we put it? In New Zealand. Okay, where do you get your water from? How are you keeping people out? What are you doing? And then they started to explain to me that they all had Navy SEALs. They all hired on contract, had Navy SEAls ready, with helicopters that are, in standby mode, fully gassed to come and protect them, and against the likes of us, once they need to go into their bunker compounds. And then I asked them, so how do you plan to pay these people after your money is worthless? And one of the guys opens this little moleskin book. It's like, how to pay security after money worthless. It's like they hadn't thought of these really super basic, Walking Dead level scenario planning, not deep shit. And so then they're talking about, do we do, can we do shock collars? Can I have a combination lock on the food that only me and my wife know? And I'm like, dude, the way to prevent your head of security from killing you in the bunker is to pay for his daughter's bat mitzvah today. And it was sort of my almost, semi, I don't know if it's self-racist. I don't know what you call it, but I'm Jewish.
In the UK, we say you're having a dig at them.
Yeah, having a dig at them, because obviously, most probably their Navy SEAL head of security doesn't have a daughter getting a bat mitzvah, I'm figuring. Sure. But it was my way of saying, look, the way to make this is the problem with that then is like, well, where does it stop? If we're nice to the security guards, then do we have to be nice to all the employees and then nice? What I was trying to show is, if you're nice to people rather than building a bunker, then maybe we won't have to have this at all. But what I was shocked by was that these guys' mindset, these guys who are the wealthiest, most powerful, in theory, most ingenious people of our time, had no confidence in their ability to avert the future, that the best they could do with all their money and all their tech is prepare for the inevitable collapse, and try to take care of themselves and their family as best as possible. And that's when I realized that they're victims of this mindset, this sort of capitalist, technocratic mindset that leaves no room for the others.
Yeah. I asked you a question earlier. I'm going to ask you it again, if that's okay. So what, if you don't mind sharing it, so what was the demographic of this room? I know there were 5 men. Were they all 5 white men? Were they people of color?
4 white. They were all in their 50s, except for one of them who seemed kind of younger and actually more directly involved in technology. They were hedge fundy guys, hedge fund guys, a VC, like 2 hedge funds, a VC, a bank executive, and sometimes it's hard to tell with these, late 30, early 40 something tech founders, if they are technologists or just founders, but one of those.
Interesting. And so something I wanted to ask you, really, because a lot of what you write about and you've been talking about here today and earlier relates to the West and the United States being the primary nation that you're referring to. But of course, the contagion spreads. And I want to give an example of what I see going on in the world today. So the American, let's take America, let's take the United Kingdom, and let's take India, just as a triage. And for good reason. So the American dream, if I look outside in, because I'm in Britain, in London, is really clear. It's quite simple. It's come here and you're going to make, if you work hard, very hard, you're going to make loads of money. And with all of that money, you can buy stuff. And maybe China will give you a lot of that stuff, and you can buy it all the time if you wish, that sort of mass consumerism. And you can give your kids the best education. And if you have the money, you can get the best health care, and and you can have bunkers, and you can have helicopters, and you can have Navy SEALs. You can have anything you desire, your fantasy, fulfilled. It's only in America. And it's clear cut, good or bad, it's clear cut. And I come to the United Kingdom, I scratch my head trying to figure out what is the promise of the United Kingdom today. And the only thing I landed on as a British citizen and a person of color from a different ethnicity is that Britain actually is sort of pseudo-capital, capitalistic, socialist, somewhere where we're lost right now. But actually, the one good thing about us is that we're pretty fair. There's a lot of fairness built into the system, as in Boris Johnson, the previous prime minister, when he was mayor, could be on the tube and I could be sitting next to him. I could go shop at Waitrose or M&S, which is our supermarket here, like, the Trader Joe's or the Whole Foods, and I could spot him in the aisle, and I could be an Amazon delivery guy, and he could be the mayor of London. And that stuff still works here to a large extent until you get to the aristocrats. Then you get to India, which is India fundamentally is a post-colonial story, and there's the dark side of that as well. In fact, Dr. Shashi Tharoor, who wrote his fantastic book, which just went crazy, Inglorious Empire, who's coming on my show in the next couple of months. I want to get a different perspective. Now we've got a prime minister with an Indian origin. So I want to hear if he's got something decent to say about the UK, or is he going to still lambast the UK? But India is fascinated and enchanted and obsessed with America. Because of its technology revolution and how that's driven GDP and changed the face of the country. But fundamentally, you go and speak to people in India. Every young person you go and speak to, and there are about 650 million of them who are under the age of 28. Their first nation, it's like, if you were to leave India, where would you go? America. And for all the good reasons, all these Indian origin CEOs, Satya Nadella, Sundar Pichai, all of these tech companies that you cover. So when you think of America of today, America has influenced so many nations, the West and the East. And devil's advocate, where did it all go wrong? Because, the capitalism's, I used to lambast, I used to sort of, go after capitalism. It's got its downsides, but, what do we have as an alternative today? But where did it all go wrong in your study, in your history? Where did we fuck this up?
Oh, it depends. There's a lot of places you could look at. You could look at when we moved from a migratory to sedentary living, and had land to defend. And once we were no longer, taking what we needed as we needed, but started to try to, turn the earth into something that would provide more than it wanted to by itself. So you can go all the way back there, or you can come, you can go forward to the colonial urge. The colonial urge partly comes from territory, but in more modern times and, since medievalism, it was really to satisfy the needs of central currency. We created interest-bearing central currency as a way of stemming the rise of the middle class in the late Middle Ages. People were trading in a peer-to-peer economy. They were getting rich. They weren't working. They broke through feudalism. And the aristocrats needed to do something to restore their unearned power over everybody. So they made money illegal. You had to borrow. They financialized the economy. You had to borrow central currency at interest from the monarchs and the aristocracy and pay it back at interest. But that meant the economy had to grow. In order for the economy to grow, you've got to start going to other places and taking stuff. And you had the leading philosophers of the time, guys like Hobbes, saying, look, go to America, take their stuff. They're not humans. They're natives, they're Indians, they're something else. You don't have to think of them as like living Christian beings. Think of them as if they're just shrubs or grass or anything else that you're going to clear cut. Not that we should think of shrubs or grass as something we should, ducks and bugs or anything as something you should clear cut either. But it was, that was a really wrong turn. And we colonized, the colonial story, America and South America and India and tried to do China. with that same view. I mean, all we're really seeing now is that we're no longer only colonizing people with brown skin. Now we in the West, we're colonizing ourselves, our own children. That's why we've got, this 1% that owns 99% of everything, and 99% who are like, what the fuck is going on here? So where did we go wrong? I mean, back when, Rianne Eisler traces it to the metallurgy. Once we, developed metallurgy, the people who had metal would use it as chains and swords to dominate the more matriarchal societies that didn't put their resources into weaponry. And it's really tricky. If you don't put your resources into weapons, then whatever society is will be able to take you over. So what do you do with that? Where do you go with that? It's a hard one. And that's why so many, so-called, I would call them innocent peoples, ended up dominated and controlled. Of course, it reaches its limit, and that's where we're at today. It reached its limit, which is why the wealthiest are going, well, how do I get out? They want to continue the same thing. You go west, you go to America, then you go there, then you go here, until you run out of territory. And then what do? And I write about this in the book. You go meta. You say, okay, I'm going to go one level above. You have Peter Thiel. You go from 0 to 1. You become one order of magnitude above everyone who's competing, whether you call it Web 2 to not be Web 1 or Web 3 to not be Web 2, whether you call it Meta to not be Facebook, or Web 1 to not be 0, or to be Kurzweil uploading your consciousness to the cloud to not be down here with the humans 1.0. You reboot to that next place. And I'm here to say that next place doesn't exist. The other thing I want to challenge is, and I think this is what we have to get over, when we say America's promise is this, and England doesn't have a promise, and this is, who's to say you get promised anything? You're not promised anything. The thing we've got to get our heads around, this is my book before this, it's called Team Human, is you are sacred right now. You don't need to achieve anything. Just the fact that you made it here, that you were born, means you are sacred and deserving of love and respect and food and shelter and everything. You're here. You should be embraced and nurtured and be allowed to participate in this. You are okay just the way you are. That's why we have, I think, why we have sacred spaces, why, the Jews, we have Sabbath, that one day a week. It's not to worship God. I mean, you can, it's fine, be thankful, it's cool. But the whole point of Sabbath is to say, no, you don't have to work. You can have 24 hours from sundown to sundown to just celebrate the fact that you're here, that you are a sacred being. And I think the more you do that, the less you would look at, oh, America, I will work hard and I will get over the thing. The American dream, reach the thing. It's great for motivating people, but there is no thing. Even you talk to a really smart, there is no Moshiach, Messiah coming. There's no thing. There's this. This is it. This is it. And the more you get that, the easier it is to get off these ends justifies the means journeys towards your exit, towards your thing, towards that thing that all the bros were looking for.
It's beautifully put. And I think it reminds me of when you go back to thousands of years ago, again, I'm talking about India only because we're talking about the fate of the world in the future. And the more I read, the more I spend time with people from different backgrounds and who have different levels of intellect, different viewpoints, and so on. It astonishes me that what I've read out of India, there's a lot of journals, a lot of Vedic scripts, the Patanjali Sutras, written thousands and thousands of years ago. And of course, the normal, the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads, there are many, many other books. But actually, they're not religious texts at all. I mean, they're stories, really. Yeah. And when you read them carefully, what they have within them is the principles, and very basic principles that you've just narrated, which is love, camaraderie, community, friendship, care, sensitivity, survival. et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And these systems that we've built, now we're challenging them. I mean, I think the whole COVID situation has been interesting. I know you've been studying this for a while, so you're a trailblazer here. But I think after COVID, a lot of people have been questioning everything, even at a basic level, like, what the hell am I doing here? Like, I wake up in the morning like a robot and I go to work at 9, I come back at 5. I know that screws me up because I take stress med. I've just had, multiple stents put in. I've got autoimmune conditions. My kids don't love me. And I was just doing this for my kids because they hate me, but I sent them to the best private schools. It goes on and on and on. It's like the great Buddha. The Buddha, Buddha talked about the contradictions, the dichotomies, the oxymorons of how human beings live their lives. I don't think it's a new phenomenon, though, is it, really, Doug? I mean, you read through all the scriptures, we've been doing this shit for a long time. But here's my question to you then. So, look, we are here today, tomorrow, who knows what's going to happen? Life is uncertain and fragile. The impact that you have made as an individual to the people around you, you've done it through the medium of media and books, right? And talks and various other things. Tell me a little bit about, I'm intrigued. What is your purpose? Like, you wake up in the morning. I know you do a bunch of things. You're a musician, so I love you for that anyway. You do yoga, but what keeps you awake? What wakes you up in the morning? What keeps you going? What's your sort of sense of purpose yourself? Because you've come to a point in your life, and I'm asking you, it's a leading question in a moment, but you've come to a point in your life where you've seen so much. I'm selfishly asking you, what have you learned about life, and what are you thinking about when you think about tomorrow?
Well, there's a lot of different questions in there.
Yes, I know.
But
I know.
To the first one, what I'm doing is I'm doing 4 things.
Okay.
And they kind of go in order, but I'm doing them all at the same time. I'm trying to denaturalize power, right? What we were talking about before. To denaturalize these things, and denaturalize just means make their man-made creation apparent. Denaturalize money, denaturalize the idea that everyone has to have a job, denaturalize capitalism, just help people see that no, God didn't make these. These are not pre-existing conditions of nature. These are creations of humans. So denaturalize power. Second, through the process, trigger agency. So once you realize that these systems have been created by other people at other times, that should trigger your agency to say, oh, well, what would I like to do instead? What kind of money system would I like instead? What would I do about jobs instead? So trigger agency. Third is re-socialize people. Once you have agency, you realize, oh, we've got to find the others and do this together. So basically help people understand that being human is a team sport. So that's just re-socialize people. And finally, cultivate awe. Cultivate awe, because once you find the other people and all that, you realize, oh, it's not about eyes on the prize getting to that thing. Once you're with the other people, you can have that experience of awe, of whether it's spiritual union or connection to nature or understanding that you're part of this thing larger than yourself. The entrance to that is other people. So it's those 4 things, really: denaturalize power, trigger agency, re-socialize people, and cultivate awe. And I try to do that, with my talks and books. I'm generally trying to challenge the underlying power structures. With my podcast, I'm trying to re-socialize people. With my graphic novels and more artsy things, and my music, I'm trying to cultivate awe. So I'm sort of doing them all simultaneously and moving, because you denaturalizing power. The people in power get really mad at you, and it's hard. They yell at you, they undermine you. So sometimes you want to move off that, and let's cultivate a little bit of awe for a while here, and then go back to denaturalizing power. Let's re-socialize people. That one's fun,
Beautiful. I love all of them, and I think one of the that's a really nice sense of purpose, and I guess you've committed your life to doing it. I want to underscore that point by telling you something which is really interesting for me. So I'm like in my mid-40s now, and I've been doing this for a couple of years. This is an education for me, right? This is selfishly my 50 MBAs, real life MBAs, because I end up speaking to such great people like yourself. Incidentally, over the last year, don't ask me why and how, a majority of the people I've spoken with are over the age of 70, somehow. I don't know, not by design, not by design. And it's just sort of happened organically. And I've been reflecting. And I'll tell you something really interesting. It's like great wisdom for me. Many of these people, some of them you might even know, Ed Hajim, High Vista, he's the hedge fund manager, story of an orphanage, young man, a lot of pain, made it really, rode the wave in the United States, giving back to society and so on and so forth. Bill Davida, who you might know, of course, Mark Stallman, yourself. I've had Nolan Bushnell. I've had many women on the show too, as well, who have given me a perspective on how after a certain point in your life, you have to sit back and you have to reflect. A lot of what you're saying here, they've not sort of articulated it in those 4 areas, but this is what they've said to me, and offline, online. They said, look, Af, this is what we've learned, right? We've done tech, we've made loads of money, we've lost money, we've done this, we've done that, we made money in the 90s, we did this, we IPO'd, all of those good things. At the end of the day, we're now close to realizing that, okay, we don't have as long as we'd like. Time is not our best friend at this point. Either we're ailing, or I can't walk properly, or my mind's not taking at the same pace, and so on and so forth. But this is what you need to remember. All of this technology is great. Live your life, go through the phases, but don't forget that you are a human being. I'm just paraphrasing. I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, no. What we see in society is that we are detaching ourselves. We're forgetting that we're human. With, you talked about social media, where there's AR, VR, it's all sexy and it sounds fantastic, and God bless you if you go into this area. But remind yourself as to community, your children, curiosity, all of the things, eat food with your hands, it's part of someone's culture. Go share a meal with your neighbors. Go give them something. Go give bake a cake, give it to your neighbor. Things like that make us human. Bill Davido talked about this story. Funny. He said, I go on this family holiday every year. I don't know, he must be in his late 70s, 80s. And he said, and I walked to the local market. I think it was in Maui. He said, I walked to the local market and I wanted to buy some fruit. So this vendor, this woman, oldish woman, she had bananas. So I said, can I buy some bananas? So she said, yeah, so sure. So she gave me some bananas. And I said, she said, I don't have a change, right? So I said, well, don't worry, keep the change. She said, So she gave me bananas, and she gave me some oranges, and she gave me some apples in lieu of the change. So sounds obvious, but he said, do you know what? It was so refreshing, because the system of bartering, what is the perceived value of what you can give someone, has been totally destroyed with the system that we live in the West. And I love the way you're breaking all of these points down, I've written them down because I'll mirror some of it. So I've learned a lot from that. And I think today what I've taken away from you is, of course, you're a great author and I admire all of that. But actually what I've taken away from this podcast is that you have a cause. You've been committed to that cause, whatever it may be. You've designed your life to fulfill whatever purpose you believe you need to fulfill till you're around. And you're not scared, and you're courageous. And you just do it. That's what I take away from you. And I don't know you. This is the first time I've met you, but that's the energy I take away from you with just a few interactions that we've had and just moments of connectivity there. And that's what I'm going to learn from this podcast outside of your book. Time's run out.
I don't know that there's not much choice in the matter, right? People are going to manifest, you could either get in the way of yourself or not. There's enough other things to get in your way. You might as well be honest with yourself about what it is you could do and what you can't, because boy, oh boy, no one else is going to be. Yeah. No, you're bang on. And I'm hoping I get to see you at some point physically, if I'm in the States or if you're in London. Yeah. And, or if I'm in the beautiful UK. Boy.
Yeah.
Anytime. I've been thinking a lot about India too. It's an interesting. India is a linchpin now in the global. Russia, China, the U.S., India, where India chooses to align itself, is going to be of major import in the next just couple of years. It's going to be interesting.
Correct. Yeah, it's a big passion for me. I do run a non-profit to drive UK India trade, so that's another conversation we can have offline. But that's the market you absolutely should be speaking to and plugged into if you're not already, of course. And it's complex as well. It's big and it's complex.
Yeah.
So we come to the close of this session. I know you've done many podcasts today, so you're probably exhausted and you probably need to have another cup of coffee. It's my evening time. I'm deeply grateful, Doug, for all the time you've given us and me and all of our listeners, and just being open and honest about your views and opinions and your style, your energy. And I love the fact that you're a musician and you're actually an artist. You're actually a performer, aren't you? I can see it. I can just see it. And I'll probably see you in a play at some point, not just directing one, maybe acting.
Don't tell anyone. It's a play. It's all a play.
It's all a play. Of course it is. It is. And so thank you so much. Before you go, just a few words. How's this experience been for you over the last hour? Just some feedback for us and for me to get better and to keep developing ourselves.
I mean, to get better, the only get better I would have is there's like the conversation is great and all that, but then when you hand it off, I'm not sure which of many things to respond to.
Okay.
Which is fine, but it gives me a moment of anxiety of like, well, is the main question that or this? And so I still feel, maybe it's my problem, but I still feel an obligation to respond appropriately. And I don't know what that necessarily is, because some of them there was like 3 questions, which to me would feel really different from each other in the same thing. So I get it. So the only, and not that even that's a problem, except that I then worry. I then...
and maybe by design, because I mean, you're the kind of guest we've had, our best place to answer these questions, because it's abstract, right? And it does go in fucking crazy directions sometimes. But you know, you're your best place for that, which is your best. Because what's the point of doing it? You know, I'm not doing this to. You know, what's the point of doing it otherwise? But I've really...
No, the point of doing it is for you to go on your journey and to then your one obligation, if you get to do a journey that most people don't get to do, your obligation is to then report back on that journey to everybody else,
Correct.
You know?
Correct. Which is exactly what I'm working on. Yeah. That's fantastic. Thank you for that. And anything that was, you know, a little bit different to the other podcasts might be just the same. So I'd love some feedback, because we capture it as a testimonial and it makes us feel good about the fact that.
I mean, I think is it as a testimonial? I mean, I like that your focus is sort of more international and universal. You know, that you're trying to bring this to a bit of a global perspective on questions rather than California's answer to each of these questions.
Yeah, good. Okay, I'll take that, and that's what I'll continue to work hard towards. And
we didn't
thank you
about
so
the
much.
Mahabharata at all, but you almost went there.
Well, I'll open up that chapter the next time we talk, because we've still got to do the yoga practice. We got to do the Mahabharata.
Mahabharata, I can't. I mean, it's good for stories, but I don't derive ethical, spiritual content from it. But like How to Know God or something. What is that called in India? I don't know what it's called. The How to Know the. It's that little book. It's the Indian book on. It's got the whole thing. How to Know God, we call it. What was it called in? I have it here somewhere. Well, we'll talk about it later. But you know, there's How to Know God from you guys. There's the Dhammapada from the Buddhists. There's some of these little books that really do. It's like everything you need to know is right here. And it's like more than enough for any one lifetime of like, so then why bother with these giant texts?
Absolutely. Check out when you get a chance. It's a bit of a long name, but something called Patanjali Sutras.
Okay.
Patanjali, Patanjali Sutras, Sutras. There's a translated version on Amazon by, I've forgotten the chap's name. He's an English, American or English man. It's got the highest voting or rating, highest stars. It's a thin little book. It was written 2,500 years ago. It's mind-blowing. You're like, what the hell? And it's literally, it's like list of 1 to 200. And you just think to yourself, how the hell was this stuff covered thousands of years ago? It's brilliant. It's like a must read. I've got it by my bed.
It's because it was true. Because it's fundamentally true.
Because it was true. Exactly. Brilliant. So where do you live, by the way, in the States?
I'm in Hastings-on-Hudson, New York.
Okay, Hudson, New York. Okay. So I will absolutely look you up, and I'll ask you for your mobile number or your cell number on email. If you could share it with me, that'd be great. Keep in touch with you. Thank you so much, Doug. Real pleasure.
Thank you.
Look after yourself. Yep, you too.
Right. Thanks,
well.
Denise. All right. Be good. Namaste.
Thank you, Denise.
Thank you.
Namaste.